So here we are today with Mr. Luther Smith. Today is Tuesday, August 9th, 2011. And also in the crowd is Kirsty Simpson. She's an intern here and a student at Emerson College. I'm Bob Cottrell, curator here at the Henny History Room in Conway, New Hampshire. The time is 10:21 in the morning. And we've got some information that you just filled out, but we're going to ask you again. You know, it's like the government where they have you do it 3 times in a row.
About 5 times.
So can you state your full name, please?
My name is Luther Earl Smith. Always called by my middle name as I was growing up until the guys hung the nickname Smitty on me. And it was Smitty from then on. Even my sisters called me Smitty.
And when was it that you were born?
I was born February 19th, 1923.
And where were you born?
In Stowe, Maine.
Stowe, Maine.
Which is right along the New Hampshire border.
Yeah. And we're talking about your service during World War II. And this interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress, for the Henny History Room at the Conway Public Library, and for the 384th Bombs Group. Is it a club or organization, or?
It's a society of the members.
Okay.
They have reunions.
Great. And just a little bit of sort of family history. What were your parents' names?
My father's name was Luther Augustus Smith. Mm-hmm. Always hated Luther. Everybody called him Gus.
Gus, okay.
Because he didn't like Luther, neither did I. And I was always called Earl until they hung Smitty on me, and that took hold.
And that's your middle name, Earl?
Yes.
Okay.
My mother was Carrie Libby Smith. Both deceased now.
Now, where were they from?
She was originally from Harrison.
Harrison, Maine?
Maine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your father? Was
Stowe.
He was from Stowe?
Yeah.
And do you have brothers and sisters? Or did you have brothers and sisters?
I had 2 sisters. The oldest one, who's 4 years older than I am, is still living. My other sister died a few years ago.
And did they serve in the military?
No.
As well? Or
No.
did your father serve in the military?
No.
No. Okay. So tell us about how you got started on your military career. You were just walking down the street one day, and next thing you knew, you were on a bus to Biloxi, or
No.
how that worked?
I've always wanted to fly ever since I could remember. World War II came along, and there was a crying need for bomber crews. And I wanted to be a pilot, but I didn't figure I could hack the college courses that they do during that training. And I thought the quickest way to get in the air would be to volunteer as a gunner. So that's what I did. And on October 13th, we went down to see the recruiter, and he said, "Come down the 12th. Oh, wait a minute. That's a holiday. Come down the 13th. So Malcolm Pittman, who lived in North Rider, and I grabbed the defense bus, which took workers from various towns to the shipyard in South Portland.
Oh.
And we rode to Portland on that, and we spent the day physicals and so forth. And then I think it was after dark before they started trucking us to Fort Devens. And the first day at Fort Devens was taken with tests, aptitude tests, and so forth. And the second day, issue of uniforms. Third day, I was on KP. And the KP crew had all been used to manual labor. And this was a snap.
Yeah.
We breezed through that. We hadn't been in the Army long enough to learn how to Goldberg. And the sergeant said it was the best KP crew he'd ever had. He wanted us back the next day. The next day we shipped out.
Yeah.
I went to Atlantic City for basic training, and I was only there for a couple of weeks. Because, as I said, they needed gunners so bad that an opening came in Fort Myers, Florida, gunnery school, and I was shipped out.
Yeah.
I talk to Army men now, infantry men, and tell them I never fired at Springfield when I was in service, and they can't believe it.
Wow.
I carried one for half a day and learned how to stack them, standing them on the butts, and would use a stacking swivel with a couple of other guys. And that was it. That was what experience I had with the Springfield. I don't remember the date when I got to Fort Myers and started the gunnery training. It was a 6-week course, and once we got to firing most everything there, handguns and the carbine, shotguns on skeet, and of course the 50 calibers in turrets, and that's where I fell in love with the ball turret.
Yeah.
Skeet shooting was fun, especially on moving base. They had a platform mounted up so we wouldn't fall out off a 1.5-ton truck. You had a box for your ammo, and the instructor rode behind you. He was strapped on. And they'd shoot these pigeons from different houses, and you could tell which direction the pigeons were going by looking at the house. And there was one shot I never got. There was one bird that came out low and crossed the road right in front of the truck. And it was so close to the truck I was afraid I was going to blast a hole in the radiator. I tried hitting it after it got across the road, but it immediately hit the ground. I never got that one. But that was fun. And we had aerial gunnery training for 6 days. The last 6 days we went in the back seat of an AT-6. They had the 30 caliber mounted on a quarter track. You swing it around and lock it, and another AT-6 pulled the tow target. There was 3 guys would go in the group, and they had different paint on the bullets, so they could tell who was making the score.
Yeah.
We didn't shoot all at the same time, but 3 would go, and then they'd look at the target. That was fun. And we got through there. I got my wings at about just before Christmas time, and I immediately became a buck sergeant. They decided we would have a school and training in something else, and a certain number went for radio schools, some for mechanic school, and I went to armament training in Larry Field, Denver, Colorado. And I think that was a 6-week course also. And it was there I met Arthur Ossipchuk from Dover, New Hampshire.
And how do you spell his last name?
Ossipchok. He tells me it's Russian. The reason I met him was that I came down with measles last week of my class, and so did he. And we were in the hospital when our class graduated and shipped out. So that left us in limbo, and we were put in shipping and receiving squadron and palled around together, and eventually a class opened up in the 75 millimeter field piece. They were taking that and sticking it into the nose of a B-25.
An artillery?
The French field piece.
Huh. I didn't know that.
And if you go to the Air Force Museum of Dayton, you'll see
Ohio.
a B-25 and that 75 laying down beside it.
I'll have to look that up.
They never showed us the mount, but we knew it had to be hydraulic to accept the recoil of a 19-pound shell.
Right.
It raised hell over in the South Pacific. They'd hop over an island into a harbor and blast away at light shipping.
Ah. Didn't know that.
We went to Lowry 2 for that, and halfway through the course, the instructor said, I don't know what you guys are doing in the class. They picked us because they needed 2 more. He said, you're not going to have anything to do with the 75, and we did.
Yeah.
But we graduated from that. They shipped us back to Larry 1, the ship and receiving, and we were getting antsy to leave the place. And about the last week, we were down to the orderly room every day and asked them when we were shipping out. We wanted to get on with the war. And they finally sent us to Salt Lake City, which is where they shipped everybody to wait, and they picked them from there to form crews. And Ozzie went to Boise, Idaho, and I went to Pyote, Texas. And I didn't see Ozzie for a while. And we got to Pyote, Texas, and we were given to a Lieutenant Heydrich's crew. And my tail gunner, he and I got on the crew at about the same time. We were the only 2 enlisted men.
Mm-hmm.
He was Jack Kushner from Los Angeles. And one night the CEO decided that this Heydrich he looked like a college football player. I figured he was 19, 20, and 6 footer, at least 185 or more. And the squadron CEOs decided he'd check him out on a night flight. So Cush and I got aboard the plane, and we'd never been told that this is the first time we've flown in the 17. We didn't know anything about it. During the flight, a plane crossed in front of us. We got into prop wash and threw us all over the sky.
Oh boy, yeah.
And the CEO called to see if we were okay. We went on intercom. We didn't know how to get on intercom. So he came back and reamed us out for not being on intercom and not wearing a parachute. Showed us how to plug in the intercom.
Yeah.
And he said he wanted us to report to the flight line the next day. So we went down to see the sergeant, and the sergeant said, I don't know what you guys did, but the CEO wants you to wear parachutes and parade around out here for an hour.
Oh boy.
And those are those seat-type chutes
Right.
that bang against the calves of your legs.
Back your ankles or knees.
And as we were doing that, Cush said, if anyone sees us, they'll think we're going to be awful foolish doing this. But we always remembered to wear a chute after that.
So the lesson was learned.
And crews started forming, guys started coming in. And we got a co-pilot who weighed about 125 pounds, 5'2", George Hunt. At that time he lived in Ohio. And the engineer came aboard, all the crew except the right waist gunner. We took our first phase training there in Pyote, and then they sent us to Dyersburg, Tennessee. Actually, the field was in the town of Halls, but we called it Dyersburg. That's where our address was, Dyersburg. And the class ahead of us had another week to go, so they gave us 7 days delay en route. And I went home, and I was home maybe 3 days. And on the way back in Chicago, the train was late. There was a couple of other guys that were there, and so we didn't report in for roll call the next morning. So we were able. We had to go see the CO.
That's not good.
And we all got together and told identical stories, which were true. And that was enough to satisfy him. Nothing was done about it. Later on, we got buck sergeants right after we graduated from gunnery school. Later on, they sent guys to training school first, and they'd get a stripe, and then stripes would be added by the time they graduated from gunnery. They'd be buck sergeants. We got back from our delay en route, and we didn't have a pilot. He had appendicitis.
Oh boy.
So we hung in limbo for a while, not too long, and they gave us this little old man who weighed about the same as my co-pilot, but he was 26 years old. And we had already bonded to hydrant. And he had to fit in, and he knew this bothered him. But we didn't know what a gem we had. He visited me in '98 and talked about this.
That's the new guy.
And he told me just how many days it was after he got out of cadets. He said, when I got to Dyersburg, there hadn't been a wheel rolled on the runway. They gave him a crash course for 10 days or something like that. He graduated, and they said, you're now an instructor pilot and instrument rated.
Wow.
And he had all these hours. The guys would come in, and he said, if you remember, there was about 500-foot hills around that field in Dyersburg. And I said, I don't remember. And he said, well, there was. And I said, I'm not doubting your word. But these guys would come in who had been flying like we were at Pio. They had this long expanse they could make low approaches. And he said they all had to be taught to make shorter approaches.
Watch those hills, yeah.
And he had a Lieutenant Roger Smith. He spoke about him that gave him grief on something. He said, we went around and I chewed him out royally. And you got to understand, this guy talked real quietly. If he was chewing you out, you'd hardly know it. But anyway, they gave him to us. And to get back to Heydrich was kind of rough on the controls, and we didn't make any smooth landings. One day we came in, and you wouldn't know you'd touched the runway unless you heard the tires skirt. And he came back. How'd you like the landing, he said. And cushion on my tail, and I said, sir, that's the best landing you've made yet. He says, Hunt made that landing. And he seemed to have a feel for it. That every time he'd land, it was like that. But boy, when he was taking off, he wanted altitude, and you could feel the plane struggling. We felt as though we ought to get out and push. He wanted to get up there in a hurry. But both good pilots, and we completed second and third phase training with Norm as a pilot. One day the weather was getting bad, and the field was closing in, and he arranged the flight. No one else was flying, but he arranged us, and we got up there in the clouds flying blind. And he told me when he visited me, I did this to gain your confidence. So they set the radio compass from Memphis and flew over Memphis, and of course the compass reversed itself, and then all I had to do was take a head in and fly at a certain speed at a certain length of time. And he spiraled down, and there was the field.
To come through the clouds, and then you got...
And for a guy that had been raised on a farm, one corn and everything, that seemed like magic to me.
It feels a little more comfortable when you see that field, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. But I don't know about the rest of the guys, but I wasn't worried. As I told the guy that had read about ball turret gunners falling from a ball turret, I said they probably didn't fasten their seatbelt. And I said, anytime I talk with a ball turret gunner, I ask them if they did, and less than half of them did. I didn't do it. I didn't bother with it. We're foolish. And the guy said, when you're young, you're not foolish. You're just brave. Anyway, we completed third phase training, and it went to Wichita for overseas staging, signing wills and so forth, and getting whatever needed replacing for clothing. And new dog tags were made. The old ones had the next of kin listed on them. the one to notify. I didn't get a new tag. Everybody else did, and I don't know why I didn't. Just didn't want to bother again. Anyway, I don't know how long we were there. Then we went to Camp Kimball, New Jersey, to wait for Queen Elizabeth. And I'm not sure how long we were there either. But eventually we got on board the Elizabeth and headed out, and Jimmy Ross from another crew, an engineer from another crew, was standing by the railing with me when we sailed out by the Statue of Liberty, and he said, "You suppose we'll see it again, Smitty?" And I said the obvious, I said, "Well, let's hope we do." I did, and he didn't. Jimmy had played piano in a dance band, and he said when they had a break, he'd take a guitar player, he called it a git fiddle, and he taught me a lot on guitar. And the day we were shot down, his crew was, and he was killed. I think it was 9 days going over. The Elizabeth was fast enough so it would outrun U-boats. And we anchored in the harbor in Scotland. And it took us ashore with boats, and we boarded a train and went down to England. And I think the town that we went to was Diss, D-I-S-S, where we got indoctrination lectures as to how to get along with the English. And they told us, you don't have to tell them we have a subway running all the way from New York to San Francisco. Guys have been here long enough, so they know better. I know I was out roaming on the hillside one day, and I ran into holly bushes. First time I'd seen it. I don't know how long we were there. A kid showed up one night, and he had a box with a bunch of small bags, and asked if anyone would like some chips. And we were thinking of potato chips. Nobody was interested, but before he left, somebody said, "Let me look at them." "Hey fellas, they're French fries." And he sold out like that and went home for more. We went to Grafton Underwood. The officers went separate from us. Gear was sent ahead of us, I guess, because all we carried was gas masks. And it was noontime when we got there, and we left the masks in a pile and went to the mess hall. And the line, as soon as you get in the mess hall, went to the right against the wall and doubled back. I stepped through the door, and the guy right in front of me hollered, "Smitty!" And it was Aussie. He had 3 or 4 missions in, so I left my crew, and I went to ask a lot of questions. And he relieved my mind somewhat. I didn't see him again until he showed up in POW camp. He was in a different squadron.
But it shot down the same day. Is that
No.
what you said? Oh, I thought you said
No.
that was the other guy.
Quite a bit later than we were. A list of missions there. The pilot had to fly one mission with a combat crew before he could take his own crew. So he was one ahead of us. But before that, the first time I flew in England, he showed up at the barracks one day. They bunked it separate from us with this Roger Smith that he told me about when he visited me, of chewing him out. He was going to fly as his co-pilot, and they were going to go to the Stub Depot field to pick up a repaired plane, take a skeleton crew down.
And where was that?
A little stone.
Oh, okay.
It was no distance at all. I think the navigator went, but it wasn't any distance at all. And we went down, and we broke a ship in on the tail wheel when we landed. So that had to be repaired. The skeleton crew took the repaired plane and went back to base. We finally got underway, and Lieutenant Roger Smith was flying first pilot. My pilot was his co-pilot. Came into the base, and he hit hard. And my pilot reached forward for the throttles, and Norm said, "No, Norm, I want to bring it in. He's going to straighten it out and bring it in." And my pilot said, "Bullshit, they're going around." And the tower called and said, "Check your landing gear." So Moore, the engineer, looked, and they had broken the drag link on the left wing, so the landing gear was hanging halfway down.
Oh, boy.
And the tower said, "Take it back a little stone, we don't want it here." So Roger Smith said, "Norm, you fly it." So they swapped seats again, and Norm got down there, and this is something else he was talking about when he visited me. The tower called and asked how he was going to bring this in, and he told them. They said, "No, you're not going to do that. You're going to bring it in on the good wheel like you planned, but you're going to hold the brake on that left wheel. Then when you lose speed and it ground loops, it'll hold that wheel in the position it's in, prevent it from folding up." And Norm said that's just what happened. There wasn't a prop band on the plane.
Really?
So they sent a truck down for us, and it got lost because it was after dark. Our co-pilot rode down with the driver. That was the first time I flew in England, which I didn't think was a very good omen.
No, it's not. On a stuck wheel.
But we started flying combat December 13th. This is another 13th. I enlisted on the 13th. This is the 13th. And I think the first mission was Bremen. The first two missions was Bremen.
Can we just go back to that landing again real quick? So what you're saying, this wheel, it was down?
It was halfway down.
Halfway down.
The right wheel was down fully.
Right, right. So
that one had been, but they broke a drag link, and
right.
It was hanging back there.
So it was hanging back
about
that
halfway
way,
down.
And it was only halfway down, and they had the brake on it. So did it rip the tires
and
up?
Hydraulic pressure would hold that in its place.
Right. But did it tear the tire up?
Probably.
Yeah,
but
I
that's minor.
Yeah. Huh.
I don't know what it did.
What? But you didn't damage the wing or the props or anything like that. Well, that's actually a pretty smart idea.
We had got to the junction of another runway, and it turned, and we had a wing over the other runway. We shut down the field.
Oh my goodness!
But it was dark, and we went into mess hall.
Mm-hmm.
The mess sergeant complained about us coming in so late to eat, and the engineer said, "We're not here but yours."
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly when this date was. It's on my flight record somewhere when I flew this flight down there for the sub-depot.
No, your first flight in London, in England.
And checking to see if I've forgotten anything.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I'm just going to check the camera and make sure that everything's looking good. Yep. I'm just going to put this picture
I think
up.
One thing we had to do in third phase training was make a 1,000-mile flight over water in formation.
Wow.
We went to Biloxi, Mississippi, and we needed an engine replaced. So we didn't go in formation. They made the flight. We were there overnight, and someone had to guard the plane, and I was willing to do that. There was enough pillows in the radio room, so I made myself comfortable. The next morning, the left Westerner came down to get me to go to mess, and there was a guard there with a rifle. And he told him, "I got to go out and get my ball turret gun." And the guy says, "Nobody on that plane." Oh yeah. And when we came back past him, he said, if you'd got out of that plane, I'd just shot you.
Wow.
Whether he had ammo in the gun or not, I don't know. But he believed he did. So we made the 1,000-mile flight the next day by ourselves. That was interesting. We didn't fly overseas like in Elizabeth. Oh yeah, I've got to. On the 5th mission, Kush got a 109, the tail gunner. What happened was we were near the rear of the formation and we had 2 wingmen. And he made a pass at one of those and came right around between them, straight in on that tail. They couldn't shoot at him, they'd be shooting at each other.
Right.
I could see him part of the time, he'd be low enough so I could shoot, but I didn't get off on a couple of bursts. Part of the time, he would be low enough, I could see him, but there was a cutoff mounted in this above the center of the sighting window that rotated with the turret, and it hit it. The switch was similar to a switch on a refrigerator door, a switch on button. It would go around and it would hit a flange that was mounted on the fuselage, and that would interrupt the current. These were fired by electrical solenoids. Same thing up front, so you wouldn't hit the props or the landing gear.
Right.
But most of the time I couldn't see him.
Yeah.
But Kush could see him all the time and could shoot all the time. And suddenly he said, I got him. And I was facing the rear. I swung my turret to the right to see if I could see him. He went down behind me, but the right way's going to confirm the kill. He's the only man on the crew that got a confirmed kill.
On that one.
And then it went along till our 10th mission. The target was Marshalling Yards in Frankfurt. And over the target, we were hit by flak. There was a burst of flak in front of the plane. Took out 2 engines, the 2 outboard engines. Also, 2 small pieces of flak came through the plexiglass nose, each side of the bombardier's head.
Wow.
And those guys wore steel infantry helmets before they had issued flak helmets. And one of those pieces went through the navigator's infantry helmet, the steel helmet, through his leather helmet, creased the top of his head, and interloper would have killed him. There was blood all over the place. And the bombardier put a compress on him, and the pilot called to ask for a head-in, and Miller, the bombardier, said he'll be with you in a minute. And the pilot didn't know Moody'd been hit until later when he came up past him with his head all wrapped in bandages. When we started out that morning, got up over the overcast, and this overcast is something I'd like to talk about. We always had it. I flew in the winter, and there was always an overcast.
Is that because of the channel?
What would happen, the radio beacon would be shot up from the center of the field. And the guys would get in the air and immediately go on instruments, and they would circle that beacon at 150 miles an hour, climbing at a rate of 150 feet per minute. And sometimes 10,000 feet of overcast. It would take a long time to get up there. And one day, the fog was so thick you could just barely make out the wingtips. The pilot had everybody in position as soon as we got off the ground, looking for other 17s. And of course, I had my guns pointed straight down, and suddenly I called out, there's a 17 directly below us, pull her up. And they knew I was serious a little bit later. I said, he's getting closer, pull her up. This was done to avoid collisions, but there was collisions. The day we were shot down, there was collision. 2 planes. And later, Moody said we had a pretty good place in the formation until that happened. 2 other planes were hit by pieces of those 2, and they aborted. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So make sure.
Careful where I put my feet.
That's okay.
And where was I? Oh, on that 10th mission. We had a heck of a tailwind once we got in formation and headed east. And of course, we were bucking that headwind. It was a headwind on the way back. And 2 engines gone, we couldn't stay with the formation. So we were by ourselves. And at one time, Moody, over France, Moody, the navigator, estimated our ground speed 60 miles an hour.
60?
That's ground speed.
Ah.
You can go faster than that.
I was going to say, how do you keep up in that?
And we were struggling along, and suddenly behind us a fort showed up. And he was catching up with us. We didn't see anything wrong with any of the engines. They were all operating. Whether he planned to reach us and stay with us to get our firepower or not, I don't know. But 20109 showed up. We called them out, and when we did, the pilot looked ahead and saw a group that had escort, and he asked for help. The 109s took passes, and they started to fire between number 3 engine and the fuselage, and the fort went down. We didn't see any return fire from any of the guns on that ship. And who knows what the situation was. Maybe they had got in trouble, and the pilot ordered the crew to bail out. He had wounded aboard. He was trying to get back. No one knows. The fort went down. 4 P-47s dropped back and said they would stay with us as long as the gas supply held out. And whether these 109s saw them, and that decided them, and maybe they're low on fuel and ammo, and they left. And Moody was charting us a course to avoid known gun installations. And we reached the French coast. And none of us thought we were going to make England. Everybody was in ditching position. Oh, before that, this is important. The co-pilot called and said, "Smitty, can you get rid of the ball turret?" I'd never heard of such a thing. He had read in Air Force magazine about a crew in Africa doing this.
To lighten the plane?
Yeah.
So you could...
That turret, with the weight of the ammo, would weigh almost a ton.
Yeah. Plus it probably had a lot of drag, too.
That, but primarily the weight.
The weight. So you want to drop the turret so that you could have less weight?
Yep. And before that, the guys in the waist had thrown out the guns and all the extra ammo boxes and everything.
Yeah.
And you know, there was a man who lived in the town of Lowell. He was born in Lowell. That flew 50 missions in Africa.
Wow.
Shortly before he died, a year or so before he died, we never talked about this. I'd see him most every day.
Yeah.
We never talked about flying. But I was waiting for my wife. She was shopping, and he was waiting for his, and he came over to the car. And out of the blue, he said, "You know, one day we dropped the ball turret, and it got us back to base." And I should have asked him then if that was written up in Air Force magazine.
So he might have been the guy.
It might have been.
Okay.
But I asked his widow after he died if he stayed in touch with the crew, and she said no.
Oh.
So I didn't know how to go about finding out if it was that crew. But anyway, the bombardier had a small crescent wrench. Have you been on the 17?
Yeah.
And you know that horizontal bar, it comes down with a shaft, a horizontal bar, and 2 legs off the end of it.
Yeah.
Those legs, there was 3 lugs fastening that to the ball turret. And we turned them out, and that dropped it down on safety lugs. And there was an electrical cord that it must have been close to 2-inch diameter. All the cords, the electrical power to the turret. You had lighted reticule in the sight for one thing, and anyway, there was a bunch of wires. we tried loosening the knurled nut that was holding it to the turret, and we couldn't. But I turned the one above, and I couldn't pull the wires out. But I said to Hal, he was the other armorer that was helping me, when the turret goes, it'll pull out. Well, there's a strong spring that's supposed to prevent that coil of wire from interfering with anything. That spring held.
Oh, really?
And that wire, those wires broke, and we had blue flame shooting back there almost 3 feet.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know what was going to happen. Hal knocked the safety lugs loose with a landing gear crank, and I was hanging onto the back of his harness because I didn't know whether we'd be stuck forward or not. I pulled him back on his butt when it went. And the pilot said when they got rid of the ball turret, the airspeed increased 15 miles an hour.
Wow.
And he could ease off on those two engines that had been pulling full power for a long, long time. A lot longer than they should have. Anyway, we reached the French coast. Nobody thought we'd make England. We were all up in the radio room in ditching position. Even the bombardier come back and joined us. The pilot called for air-sea rescue, and 2 Spitfires met us at mid-channel.
Yeah.
And they were escorting us to a fighter field in the town of Shoreham. We crossed the English coast, and the pilot saw what he thought was a landing strip. He lowered his landing gear and started making an approach. And they started firing red flares at us, and he saw tanks running around, and he said he got the impression they didn't want us in there.
I guess not.
But one of those Spitfires came back and flew over our left wing and went ahead, which means follow me.
Follow me, yeah.
We got over the town of Brighton and ran out of gas in the 3rd engine. And he had to set it down. He saw what he thought was an open field. And they didn't see the high-tension wires until it was too late to get over them.
Oh, no.
He didn't have power enough to try to get over them, so he landed directly under them. And also, as another problem, a right wingtip was going to hit a tower. And he said, talking to me about it, he says, I don't know what caused me to cross those controls, but he said to Hunt, follow me through. They gave it hard right wheel and hard left rudder, and they slid the plane and missed the tower.
Sideways, yeah.
And I said, I know, Norm, it was all those hours you had before we ever got to know you. And it was lucky we were near a tower because if we'd been midway, the sag of the wires wouldn't have given us clearance. We bounced a couple of times and flew and landed, and everybody piled out. The only smart one was a left waist gunner. He dropped down through the hole where the ball turret had been. He was the first one out. Everybody else went out over the radio room. The tail gunner got out on the ground, and he said, good old terra firma. The more firma, the less terror. And I sent a guard up. A guard came to guard the plane, and we were down a while, and this elderly gentleman, he probably was late 40s, early 50s, elderly to us, showed up with a huge picnic basket with sandwiches, and he says, I brought a couple of thermoses of tea. And we weren't too interested in his tea until he told us he also brought a bottle of cognac. So we laced the tea with the cognac and ate his sandwiches. And it was nice of him to do this. And this Caldwell that wrote the book, Survivors, he did some research, and he said, without a doubt, this was, I don't remember the name, but he and his wife had kennels there. And their daughter lives in the house now. The next day, they sent a skeleton crew down for us. They kept us in a hotel in town, in the Loft Affair. The cops were set up there. The enlisted men, I don't know what the officer said, they might have had rooms. But it was fine. And they fed us. I don't know, there was a waiter wanted addresses for his daughter wanted that name and address. And the next day they sent a skeleton crew down for us. And the flight surgeon came to look at Moody's head. And our ground crew chief came to look at the two engines. And he told my pilot and lieutenant, I can repair the engines. We can tow it up the top of the hill in an open pasture and gas it up and you can fly it back to base. And he wanted to do that. And they did do that. Later there was crews for this purpose to go to planes and repair them. But Big Week was coming along where they were predicting 5 days of good flying weather. So
What'd you call that? Big Week?
They called it Big Week. The day we were shot down was called Big Week.
B-I-G.
B-I-G, Big Week.
Okay, because of the weather.
Books written Big Week. There's a title.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They flew 5 days in a row. And we flew the 20th, the 21st, and we shot down on the 22nd. If we'd get back, we'd have flown the 24th. Yeah. The 23rd. They had 3 new G models come in that had the chin turret. The one that the original plane was an F. It didn't have the chin turret, and the G model, the waist windows was staggered, so that the guys weren't bumping into each other the way they had been when they were opposite each other. They gave us one of those, and all the bugs hadn't been worked out of it. My pilot spoke to the maintenance officer, Colonel Buck. He said, Colonel number 3 isn't pulling full power, and Colonel Buck said, Lieutenant, you're the airplane commander, either grounded or fly it. Mm. And to his maximum effort, we flew. And we had never seen so many fighters as we did that day. The 8th Air Force had 3 targets that day.
This is the 22nd?
Yep.
Yeah.
Different groups were going to different targets. Ours was Oschersleben, ball bearing wings. Some of the groups got started and were called back due to weather. Some of the fighter escort didn't even get off the base because of weather. It was messed up. But our group went on, and they were waiting for us. Our pilot read it in an email he'd sent. It was forwarded to me. He said the same thing. They'd never seen as many fighters. Normally, a fighter would come in, and you would shoot it coming in, and as it passed, and after it went by, and you could get some idea if anything had happened to it. Not this day. They came in, you shot at them. Once they got by, you forgot about them and started looking for others. And I was hitting them. I saw pieces flying off the cowling. I saw smoke. But what happened to them, I don't know.
No idea.
Later in POW camp, Eka, my assistant radio operator, was in another compound. He went on sick call one day, and the doctors were in our barracks. Came to talk to me, and he said, a man who had been on that flight, it became a POW later. They saw us shoot down 4 fighters, but there's no way of confirming it. We were shot down and near Dortmund, Germany, and they took Moody, who was left-handed. He'd lost these 3 fingers on his left hand. Carried a piece of 20 millimeter around his wrist for a couple of months anyway. Hit in the right thigh and the left foot all from that 20 that exploded off the gun he was firing. And the right waist gunner was hitting the ankle, flesh wound, and I was hit.
So that's where you sustained your injury, was in the air?
I'm sorry.
That's where you sustained your injury, in the air?
Yeah.
In the turret, in the ball turret itself?
What had happened was an empty case from radio operated. It should have been the door on the rear of the radio room. It was taken off. And last fall, I was talking to an evadee, and I spoke to him about that. He said they took that off to make it easier if they had to ditch.
Right.
Anyway, empty case from radio operator's gun lodged between my turret and the azimuth gear, and I could just barely move the turret. I got the guns down, which brought the door up inside. I opened the door, saw what the problem was, had the case in my hand when I was hit. At the same time, we went with a heck of a dive. And the only man I knew of, besides the pilots, that moved during that dive was the left waist gun. He said when they pulled out of that dive, he had his shoes on and the door off.
Wow.
Because he didn't think they were going to pull out of it, and he wasn't staying.
Right.
The pilot told me that he called Cush, the tail gunner, and wanted to know what the damage was. And Cush said, all your control surfaces back here are shot. And he said, look over your shoulder. And Norm said, I looked back, and there were about 10 or a dozen 109s coming at us, and I thought I'd give the plane evasive action, drop it down 60 feet or so and back up so they wouldn't have a steady target to shoot at. I pushed the yoke forward, and we dove 9,000 feet.
Wow.
And they got it pulled out of the dive and on automatic pilot. And he said, Cush said, he said, I wasn't on the intercom. Cush said, Norm said, prepare to abandon ship. And Cush said, I looked, and there was 2 chutes opening up. The navigator and bombardier were already prepared.
Ah. What was your altitude, though?
Around 19,000, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure. It was down enough so we weren't bothered too much without oxygen. And that's another thing, the oxygen had been shot out.
Wow. So
I got my chute on all right, because it felt as though the hand was there. Still does for that matter, but nothing as strong as it was then.
Yeah.
Have you seen the chest packs and know how they fasten on?
Yeah.
That snap goes up into a couple of rings on the harness. You can wear your harness all the time. And I went back to, here was another thing that wasn't up to snuff. There was supposed to be a safety strap for this purpose mounted by the main escape hatch. There was a plywood platform there that this was supposed to be mounted on. The strap was there, but it wasn't fastened, and we knew it wasn't. I went back to get that, expecting maybe I could tie the end of it onto the plane somehow.
Right.
The other end, they had the snap hook in your D-ring. And Cush, the tail gunner, was calling up past the tail wheel. He saw my problem, and these were folded back and forth, and a couple of rubber bands holding the fold. He snapped those off and hooked the snap in my D-ring. And I was still waiting for him to hand me the end of that. He didn't have to do this. He could have bailed out. I wouldn't have faulted him. And he said, well, go ahead.
So
And I realized he was going to hold that strap, so I rolled on out, and that's what happened. He opened my chute for me.
yeah, I was going to say, so he pulled the cord.
I tried to get an award for him for this. And I filled out all the forms, and everybody thought that'll do it. But no, they wanted an eyewitness.
Wow.
I was the only
You were
eyewitness.
the only one.
I visited Cush and his lady in '06, and they met me at the airport and started to drive to the house, and we'd gone a long ways. We passed the oil pumping and everything. And I said, I get the impression Los Angeles is a little bit larger than Conway, New Hampshire.
That's where he was living then?
Hmm?
He was living in Los Angeles then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where we were born. And there was something, when my pilot visited me, I told him about one day we got back late on a mission, and we knew we weren't flying the next day, so we didn't give the guns a real good polish. We cleaned it. We gave them a lick and a promise and figured next day we'll come over and we'll clean them good. And there was another crew in our barracks. They knew they weren't flying the next day. They did the same thing. And somebody arranged a truck for us. So we went down to flight line, 12 of us, and here was a truck, but there wasn't any driver. We waited quite a while, and Coach said, I can drive that truck. So we all piled into the back of the truck, and he drove us over to the armament shack, and we cleaned the guns in good shape. We get back and headed to the barracks. Coach was in the lead. And the driver ran up and said, who drove that truck? And Coach, without breaking stride, the guy that drove the truck, without breaking stride and pointing at the building, said he just went into parachute. And my pilot said, I guess he didn't roam the streets of L.A. for nothing. They took us to a hospital, 3 of us. We went to a field station.
This is after you bailed out?
After we were down.
Okay.
I had a welcoming committee waiting for me down there, about 15 Germans.
Yeah, right.
And the wind carried me over a fence into another field, but there wasn't any time that got to me.
Yeah.
And the wind was still blowing. I landed on my side. I tried to spill the chute. I could pull the bottom shroud, but I couldn't hold it. So I wasn't gaining anywhere. And the German walked up behind the chute,
grabbed it,
and encompassed it with his arms, and then I could stand up. And I didn't wear the leather fleece-lined clothing that the waistgunners had to wear down the bowl turret. I wore woolen, long-john, one-piece heated suit and ordinary coveralls covering them. I had found a length of parachute about 7 feet long, a foot wide. And after I had my throat mic on and everything, I wrapped that around my neck about 3 times, twice in a way, and folded it inside my coverall. That disappeared. I imagine some frau thought she could use that nylon. My helmet and goggles disappeared, and mask, a throat mic. And I want to speak about the mask. You get up in altitude, and unless you remove your mask every once in a while and rattle the ice out of it, your vapor from your breath would freeze, and it would close off. One day I didn't answer position check. The bombardier was calling. He yelled quite loudly. And Hallam, my left waistband, I picked up an empty cartridge case and come up and wrapped on the turret, and that snapped me awake. I realized what was happening. I reached down to the control and threw it on pure oxygen. On automatic oxygen,
so
they
that
give
seals it up or something. The ice seals up.
Yeah, it would close up the opening, so
you just kind of nod off.
I just went to sleep.
Yeah.
If we always set it on automatic, and then as you get altitude and the pressure and so forth, it would automatically give you the amount of air that you needed. Yeah. And we talked with a new crew one time, and I asked, who's the ball turret operator? And the guy raised his hand. I said, you make sure you rattle the ice out of your mask. It happened to me one day. I said, you're not moving around down there as much as the waistgunners are.
Right.
And it can happen easily, and you don't realize what is happening.
Yeah, but it comes on slow.
Where was I? We were going to, in this field station, I saw my pilot and co-pilot. And while they were there, I was laying on my parachute. While they were there, this medic came in with a big pair of scissors and cut off what was left that were holding me. Yeah. The bones were gone. There was just some flesh and tendon about the size of your arm. And I was surprised to hear it. Of course, he was hitting nerves that hadn't been damaged. And my pilot said, after he walked out with your hand, you asked if anybody had a cigarette.
Yeah.
And I lit a cigarette and stuck it in your mouth. And I said, no, I don't remember that, but it doesn't surprise me. I was bumming cigarettes from everybody. They left. They took them out. They both banged their shins when they bailed out of the Bombay, and both of them limping. But they took them out, and then Moody showed up, and he sat in a chair, and I said, hi, Moody, and he looked around. And Ecker must have come in there. He came in somewhere, because they took the three of us, Moody and Ecker and I, to a hospital in the town of Una, U-N-A, a Catholic hospital, I assume, because the nurses were habits. And I remember going through the outside door, and then I had a few feet. There was a set of 4 stone steps, and I remember how those were worn from the thousands of footsteps that had been taken over them. And I noticed that. I stubbed my toe on the top step. I didn't fall. I caught my balance. But this nun was about 10 or 15 feet away, walking towards me, and when I stumbled, she ran to help me. And I didn't give it a thought then. But late years I've thought of it a lot. I was the enemy.
Yeah.
And she ran to help me. I spoke to a doctor friend about it, and he said, well, she had 2 things going for her. She was a nurse and she was a nun. We were only there overnight. We had a good surgeon, fatherly type of guy. And Moody was afraid he was going to take his whole hand. And he said, Doctor, I can move the thumb and finger. And the doc left it. And when he went to leave, Moody took his other hand and patted him. Good job. And the doc laughed. They brought a meat wagon, and there was 2 members of another crew, a navigator and a tail gunner. They were occupying 2 of the bunks, and my 2 crew members operated the other one. I sat on a jump seat behind the driver and guard. And they drove us 40 kilometers to a military hospital, and I don't remember the name of the town. I know we passed through a town where I saw the sign Essen. Essen is a town.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the town the military hospital was in. There was Germans on the first 2 floors, and we were on the 3rd floor along with the rest of the riffraff, Russians and Poles and Italians
Whole
and
gang.
French. We had French orderlies.
Yeah.
The only place I saw a female nurse was at that first hospital, the Catholic hospital. And we were there while the navigator on the other crew was really shot up. And he didn't think maybe he would make it, and one day he said, Slayton, my wife's address, and he gave his wife's address, knowing that Slayton would remember it, and he did. He died. So I left 4 of us. Slayton and I, and Ecker and Moody. And we met this Russian, Panov. He was overjoyed to meet Yanks, and he could speak a little English. He waited on his hand and foot. Now, his feet were in terrible shape, by the way. He'd been working in a salt mine, which is the reason they had him in the hospital. He'd empty urinals for us, which were tin cans, bring our food trays in for us. And this one particular day, he just emptied a urinal and left. And in no time at all, he was back with a food tray. He must have run into the food cart in the hall. And they gave us this black broke that was hard to digest, and we weren't used to it yet. And they also gave us some artificial honey, which was quite hard and hard to spread. But Slayton and I finally figured if we spread that on real thin, the combination of the honey and the bread wasn't too bad. But Slayton had an elbow was fouled up, and he was having difficulty spreading that on. Tanner was standing there, and he said, me fix, and he grabbed the knife, and Slayton said, no, Pano, you put too much in one piece. And Pano said, piece no, I washed my hands. And we laughed, and we realized that we shouldn't be laughing. He was serious.
Oh, poor guy.
It took Slayton quite a while to explain to him he was talking about a piece of bread.
Right.
He was a nice man. He said when the war was over, he wasn't going back to Russia. He was going to England or America. In America, he said, everybody rich, everybody have motor car. In America, everybody gentleman. We tried to tell him he was a gentleman. No, found out no gentleman. Apparently, there's a distinction between the working class and the gentleman in Russia. Always wondered if he made it to America, or hoped that he did, so he could learn that he too was a gentleman.
That's neat.
I don't know how long we were there. They finally moved us to Oberrussel in Frankfurt, where the interrogation center is, and we were all put in those solitary cells. And they took Moody and I out and sent us to the hospital section. Ecke went to camp from there. He had healed up, so he went to camp. And it was in the hospital section where we met Colonel Martin, who had been a P-51 pilot, and they kept him solitary for 31 days trying to get information from him. He and Moody went back. They were both discharged and everything. Lived in Kansas City, and they were lifelong friends. And I was interrogated there by a German officer. He took me in an empty room and wanted to know the names of my crew, and said, well, since you won't tell me, I'll tell you. And he had them all right except the co-pilot. And I think it was deliberate, so I'd say something. And they didn't bother with us too much. I mean, it was a big week. They were getting an awful lot of air crew. They knew 10 men landed in a small area, that were all from the same plane, and they knew the Mackins on the plane. They had spies in England and everything. They had all the information they needed anyway. So they didn't bother with us too much. And then we went to Obermarsfeld, the town of Obermarsfeld. It had been a boys' school, and they took it and used it for a hospital for POWs. It was run by English doctors who had been captured in Dunkirk and volunteered to stay and take care of the men. And it was there that I went before a board consisting of a Swiss, a German, and English doctor, and was considered unfit for military service. And I was to be on the next exchange of disabled. Moody should have been on that exchange, but he didn't. The English doctors had removed that piece of 20 millimeter he'd had in his wrist. And of course there's no recovery room. They took him back to his bunk, and this lieutenant came to see me, and what's Moody yelling about? He said, he's all, no, pull her up the wires, and I told him about a 10th mission. Well, we wondered, he said, and I said, is Moody going before the board? Oh yeah, that's all taken care of. He didn't know diddly about it. I've always been sorry that I didn't see whoever was in charge and make sure that he did, because he should have come back when I did. He came back on the next exchange, wrote me a letter and said, Smitty, I got on the list this time. I got in charge of the list. And Moody Wood, he later became chief legal counsel and CEO of a big trucking company in Kansas City. And it got crowded in Obermarsfeld, so they moved us 6 kilometers to Meiningen, old concert hall. Those that could walk, walked, and I walked, and on this walk I met my best friend that I had in service, aside from the crew, Raymond Gilstrap. And he was the one that the next morning we had to join in bunks. I said, you'll help me tie my shoes. You don't need any help, Smitty. He showed me how to tie my shoes with one hand. once the space agency designed Velcro, I was happy. That's a lot better.
Yeah.
And we finally went out to camp from there, and we paddled around, and we came onto a guy playing the guitar one day. And we listened. Gil said, I used to play guitar, and I said, so did I. After a minute, he says, you suppose the two of us could play that guitar? He'd lost his left arm above the elbow. And we did.
And that's what the pictures of you guys here?
Yeah. That was after we got to Annaberg.
I'm just going to... that picture there.
We got to Annaberg, and one day, they started treating us good in Annaberg. We were soon going to be back in the States, and they were using crowd psychology on us. And Gil showed up one day. He'd been in the storeroom, and he found a German boot. And he brought it, and Smitty, he says, this has, not that.
I was going to say that's a good.
This has 6 strings. You're supposed to tune it like a guitar. And it was a forerunner of a guitar. And
Right, sure.
In fact, that's the way it was tuned anyway.
Yeah.
We were playing that, and this Sid White, the guy sitting behind the microphone.
Yep.
And you notice the call signs, WHEN.
Oh,
It'd been long enough, so we were wondering, when is that train going to get here and get us out of here?
I didn't notice that before. That's great.
He and Lieutenant Higgins, the buxom girl, came and asked if we would be in this show. So we did. It was 2 nights then. We sang a couple of songs, and as I said, we didn't think we were doing so much, but the rest of the guys did. They tried to tell us, when you get back to the States, you ought to hit the nightclubs. Wounded veterans, the war is still in progress and everything, you'd make a mint of money. And they finally brought the Red Cross train, and we all got aboard, and they took us to a port in Germany. I don't remember the port, and pulled us onto a boat. And once we got away from port, we could go up on the deck, and we could see Sweden. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they pulled the train off that boat in Sweden, I relaxed for the first time. I figured if anything happened now, I'd be interned in Sweden, and that wouldn't be too bad. That night, we made a trip down to Göteborg, Sweden. They got on the Gripsholm. And the first meal we had in Gripsholm, we went into mess hall, and here was crystal chandeliers and white linen tablecloths and everything. Everybody spoke in hushed tones. It was almost reverent, as if we were in church.
Wow.
And we made, I don't know how long it took us to get to the States, but we ran into a storm on the way. You could roam around on the ship any way you wanted to, and I was down lower decks during that storm, and I saw this door. I wondered where it went, so I opened it, and people tell me it was the poop deck. The bow would come up, the stern would get down, water would come up in over that deck, and then vice versa, the screw would come out of water and the rear of the boat would shake. I went out there and let the door close, and immediately thought,
no.
I wonder if that's locked.
You're stuck.
It wasn't.
Wow, you could have been stuck out there the whole trip.
Nobody knew I was there.
Oh, wow.
Nobody knew where I was. Then one day I saw a guy with a brand new barracks bag full. I said, what's happening? New uniforms, he said. Pointed to the door, and I went in. There wasn't a soul there. Everything was laid out on a long table, just what we were issued, and that's what I took. Got to the end of the line, and there was boxes of wings. I'm a wing collector now.
Yeah.
Not as much now as I was a while ago. And I tell wing collectors, there was boxes. I could have grabbed handfuls.
Wow.
They said you could have grabbed boxes, and they just shook their heads.
Wow.
But wings were nothing. Everybody had wings.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I'd started collecting them that I found you got to pay for them, Smith. Met a guy from Pennsylvania, said he wouldn't pay today's prices. He said, when I was started collecting wings, I could get them for $1, sometimes 50 cents. I said, how many wings you got? He said, I got a lot of them. He wouldn't tell me how many. That's about my story.
I have a couple questions. What was the dates when you came back?
September 29th, I'm not sure.
Okay.
We went to Halloran General Hospital. We stopped in Liverpool to let the English off.
Yeah.
And the general in charge of the hospital in the European section came on board and said he thought it was only fitting we got a Purple Hearts there. So we did. And he said, I'm giving each of you a letter saying that you should get a 30-day furlough with a 30-day extension if you want it. And we got to Halloran General Hospital and started yelling about furloughs. And they said, you get your furlough when you get your permanent hospital. We got to Battle Creek, Michigan, and started yelling about furloughs. You can't have a furlough now. We all showed him the letter. Didn't realize you had so much rank behind you. Anyway, I had 30 days, and at the end of the 30 days, I sent a telegram, have unfinished business, request 30-day extension. And the gal read it and said, you're not stating that anybody's sick, your mother isn't sick? I said, no, they'll get it. She was surprised. It did. They didn't have anything to do with us anyway. You want me to explain these?
Yeah, before you do, I had two questions. What was the name of, did you guys name your plane that you crashed
We
in?
didn't.
You didn't?
We were thinking about, the pilot lifted us up to
Yeah.
the enlisted men.
Yeah.
We were tossing names around, and where is he here? Hallam, Galena, Kansas.
Second from the right
real,
on the first
real
row.
quiet guy sitting on his bottom bunk and listening to us. And I said, Hal, you must have some idea. Well, the only thing I could think of is 10 high. You know, I said, that's it. And everybody said, yes. We got down, and it already has a name. Spirit of Winston Wynn II. Our ground crew chief named it.
Oh.
He had the original Winston Wynn. It was shot down. The second one, he named the second. He got ours. He named it the Spirit of a Second. Pilots came over to see us. They knew we were disappointed. And Norm said, I've done some checking, and we got just about the best aircrew chief ground crew chief on the base. If he wants to name it Winston Wynn, let's let him do it.
Let him do it.
The co-pilot spoke up and said, fellows, you got to realize you can't hurt a spirit.
Yeah.
And that's what we left over in the town of Patcham. And to get back to that, we flew low over a schoolyard before we landed. And there was a boy, 9 years old. His name was Trevor Evans. Ran to where we were, and he came onto a Land Army girl riding the Fords and tractor. She gave him a ride to the field where we were. I don't remember seeing the tractor. I don't remember seeing the boy. But they made the movie Memphis Belle, and his cousin provided the military vehicles, the American vehicles for that movie, and his son, Trevor's son, was a mechanic keeping them running. And he said that triggered him into thinking he ought to see if he could find anybody that was on that crew that landed February 8th over there in Patcham. And the 8th Air Force magazine editors spoke about somebody wanting to know if any of that crew were living. And I wrote to him and said, I'm curious as to who wants to find us. He sent me his letter. And Trevor came over here several times. I went to England in '93 with Jack Wallenhurst. He had been Navy. And the 8th Air Force was flying sub-patrol attached to the RAF. The 8th Air Force navigators were having trouble navigating over water, and they gave a job to the Navy, and Jack was a tail gunner on a B-24. His flight wing was going back there, and he wanted to go back separately from them because there was friends that he wanted to meet again. The lady that did the laundry and so forth. Well, she was gone, but her daughter found her. Anyway, Trevor met us at the airport. He and his wife met us at the airport and drove us to a motel. We'd asked for a bed and breakfast, and we could have stayed with them, but they were going to go to the continent. And then the last day, he drove us to this garage where his cousin had all the vehicles. And Jack invited them over, and they came over later. And I got him to go to one of our Grey Eagles meetings because Trevor told me while we were corresponding, get a good day, I'll go up and I'll take pictures of that field. He sent me 9 pictures, and I had them mounted on styrofoam.
Wow.
Quite long. It's as long as this table.
Wow.
And I took it to one of our meetings and explained it, the mission. And then Trevor got there and he explained it. When the pilot visited him, I got him to explain it to the guy. And I got a picture of the Land Army girl, Grace Vine, and while we were at Jack's base over there, Sally B was in there, and we talked about the plane, and people were asking us questions and so forth. And there was a kid that heard me, told his mother, and his mother got in touch with the Air Force airport manager and got my address. She wrote to me. And she sent me a picture of this Jill, who thought we were going to fly into that cottage. We were so low.
Oh, wow.
Her mother had told her to lie down on the ground.
Wow.
And I've been back. I stayed at Trevor's place, and he took me to see these people, this Grace Vine and Jill. Jill's mother was bedridden. Her father was in a wheelchair. I had a nice conversation with him. I remember when we left, he said, "Don't wait so long before you drop in on us again."
Wow. Let me make sure I can get the camera on these pictures as we talk about them.
I want to tell you about this.
The bottom one, okay? Yep, go ahead.
Get it steady?
Yep.
This is a plane from our group. This Ossett that I told you about from Dover, New Hampshire, was a ball turret gunner. He said the radio operator says they're dropping the bombs on us, and the lead plane from another group did. The guns were down. They were on the bomb run. Every ball turret gunner would have his guns pointed down so he could watch his own bombs drop. That meant that the door to the turret was inside the plane. Ozzy said he opened the door and floated out into the plane. His chute was there in midair. He grabbed it and put it on, and he was going to run out the end of the plane where there was nothing but a waist gunner there. This guy plots. This was a page from group history. I had him sign the page when I saw him at a reunion. So Ozzy started out through the right waist window and got stuck in the window, pulled the ripcord, and let the chute pull him out. Ozzy said it was our 10th mission, our 22nd mission. 2 more missions we could go home. He said, They were on the 23rd mission. They completed 22. And that's what happened to him. Ozzy now lives in Ozark, Alabama. I called him last Christmas time. And over here is the interior of a ball turret. This is Collins Foundation plane, by the way. And this heel cup here is for your mic switch. And the heel cup here handled the reticules. You had a horizontal line and two vertical lines, one above and one below. You could move those vertical lines. The idea was you dial in the wingspan up here on the site, and you keep those vertical lines on his wingtips. It would computerize and take care of bullet drop, relative speed, the whole work. And up here it shows a ball turret gunner in the turret. It was quite comfortable. You were laying on your back most of the time. And in there it shows the ammo boxes with his toes underneath the ammo boxes. Most of those you go on, they're on static display, fly around now, including Collins. And they have the original boxes. They're mounted up in on the frame inside the plane. I'll take that. And this is the fuselage of our original plane. Spirit of Winds and Wind. It was repaired. They flew it down to Staunton. They put a chin turret on it and a new ball turret and 4 new engines. And they gave it to the same Roger Smith. He flew it for a week and landed in Switzerland with it. And this is a fuselage on a flatbed railway car that's going to be scrapped. I've already shown you this one, similar to us when we came back, but as I said, we were a lot lower. We were just above the water. They didn't think they could get over the White Cliffs of Dover. I've been to Oshkosh 3 different times. In '86, my co-pilot's son said, "We'll find Chuck Yeager." And when we did, he says, "Give me your camera and I'll take your picture." And in '88, I took the picture out and had Chuck sign it. And in in '98, same year, the co-pilot's son got a professional photographer who was there filming the entire group of volunteers to get us together. And as I said, Frank Borman had a King Cobra that he'd refinished, and he had that there, and we'll buy it. This is a co-pilot's widow and her granddaughter. This is a co-pilot's son and his wife. This is my pilot, this is me, and this is Frank Borman. And if you get a chance to go to Oshkosh, by all means do it. And like we already saw the picture of the...
Can you go ahead and point the people out, though, for that?
Point out the pictures?
Yeah.
The men?
Yeah.
I don't know as I can remember them all. The man behind the mic here is Sid White, who wrote a book, Barbed Wire Odyssey. This is Tex... I think this is Tex Wall. This is Lieutenant Higgins. This is Gilstrap and me. This guy's name is Tyler. I saw his address in a POW address book, and I wrote to him with this picture on the letterhead of my letter and asked if he was the man in the picture. Oh, yeah. He had 5 kids. They'd all gone through college. I don't remember the other girl. The names I don't remember.
Yeah.
But this man here, I've got the names written down on the back of a picture at home. And the Germans might have given us these pictures. They took the pictures. And this is the only place that I had any POW money, and I might have bought the pictures. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, they might have given us to us because they were using us good.
Yeah.
Del Porter. This guy's name is Del Porter. Beautiful voice. No doubt, there was no doubt at all that he had voice training. He could sing almost better than Bing.
And then can you go, we're going to scan this is a better quality than we had scanned before. Can you just tell us the back row from the left to the right and then the front row?
Yep. I'll let this hold, guys. This is my pilot, Norman DeFries. This is the navigator, Ivan Moody. The bombardier, Alice Miller. The co-pilot, George Hunt. His son is a junior. The front row is Lloyd Moore, flight engineer. Me, ball turret. Hap Ecker, right waist gunner. Jack Kushner, the tail gunner. Holly Hallam, left waist gunner. And William Wright was radio operator.
Do you remember when and where that picture was taken?
It was taken shortly after we got on our base. The deal was crews were coming in and being lost so quickly that the CO didn't remember them. So he had every crew have the picture taken.
Yeah. Now, is that the Spirit of Winsome, or is that your first plane?
This one?
Yeah.
It was just a plane that was near the photo studio.
Oh, okay.
But it was an F model like our original one was.
Yeah, it doesn't have the
Chin turret.
chin turret, so that's the F.
When my pilot
as in
visited
Frank.
me, I told him I wished we'd had an old plane that last day, and he said, so do I.
Yeah.
Because we weren't used to that new plane.
Right.
We must have had some practice missions with it, but I don't remember.
Yeah, and the new model was the G. G as in George.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We started, as I remember, we started right in flying missions with it. Because it was a hurry up. It's big week and maximum effort every day.
Yeah. And so tell us about being mustered out, or whatever you call it. So you were in Battle Creek, I think you said.
In Battle Creek, Michigan.
on furlough,
and
on extended furlough.
Huh?
You were on, last time you've talked, you said you were on Battle Creek on extended furlough.
Yeah.
So
I
what
tell
happened
people
then?
the best time I spent in service in the hospital. And they said, I imagine that was the best time to be in the... I just imagine that, but it was.
Yeah.
I was convalescent. I had more or less healed and everything, and this was a big family out there.
Yeah.
The general in charge of the hospital, I was in a hurry one morning, getting to a class, and I came down the stairs, and there was two sets. He was on the landing between the two sets of flights. Good morning, he said. I said hi, and went down by him. It was like that.
Wow.
He was a fatherly old guy. And they had stage where they brought in stage shows to entertain us. And anyone who could play an instrument. We had one guy who was real good on the accordion. He did. And Gil wanted us to do that. I never got to do it. I've got it all figured, Smitty. He said, we'll have a chair set up by the mic. You come in from stage left carrying the guitar and ask if anyone's seen your right-hand man. And I'll come in from stage left and say, here I am. And we'll sit down and we'll show those guys that we can play the guitar. I said, Gil, no. Can't do it. I wish I had.
That would have been.
I wished I'd seen the doc and say, "Give me something to quiet my nerves."
Yeah. How about showing us your jacket?
I asked if I could stay in, and they said, "Yeah, you can stay in, even with your disability." But I couldn't get a flying job. If I'd been a good radio operator or a good flight engineer, I might have gone on Air Transport Command, but they didn't need armor gunners. So I got out. And my buddy Jack said, "You would have had it so good they'd given you an extra stripes by staying in. And in no time at all, you'd have your own armament shack with maybe 10 men, 6 to 10 men under you. And all you'd have to do would be to sign forms and drink coffee." And I said, "Jack, it's too late to recruit me now."
So what'd you do after the war?
I found it difficult to get a steady job. No one wanted to hire a one-armed guy. I worked several seasonal jobs. In Freiburg, Maine, there was 3 corn cannon factories.
Right.
Most every farmer had small herd of dairy cattle, but he had a cash crop every year of corn.
Right.
And I got a job in the cannon factory that first year. And later on, the winter time, I learned how to trap beaver and made small income on that, but that was a couple of months. And eventually, I drove tractor on the road mowing bushes. The guys set up the control so my horse could operate it and so forth. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I got a chance to go on a lookout tower. Over to Bridgeton, Pleasant Mountain and Bridgeton.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that. I met a lot of people. Camp kids climbed it, preparatory to climbing Mount Washington. At one time, I had to hike in groups from 5 different camps on top of the mountain eating lunch.
Wow.
And then eventually, I took a test for rural letter carrier, and I worked as a rural letter carrier for 20 years.
Yeah. Were you over there when they had the fires? Was that 47 or 48?
No, that was before mine.
Oh.
I talked to the guy. He said, "Boy, the sights I saw last year here."
That must have been something.
Yeah.
That must have been really something.
Because Brownfield real close.
Yeah, sure. They're doing a talk about that in a couple weeks or something like that.
No, I wasn't there for that.
That must have been.
But I was only on a year. I didn't finish my second. I was there 1 full year. I took this guy's place for a month, and then I was on 1 full year, and the next year I started driving mail midsummer.
Yeah. Where all did you go? What was your route?
From Lovell. I went over from Lovell and went to Freiburg Harbor, up through Union Hill in Stowe, West Lovell, and back to the village.
Yeah.
Later they changed that. I think the person now is based in Freiburg. And that was good. There was good perks.
Now tell us a little bit about, before you went into the war, you went, where did you go to school, go to high school?
I went to Freiburg Academy.
Okay.
I didn't graduate. I didn't graduate until about 4 years ago. I got my diploma then.
Good for you.
Those at law school and one in the service.
That must have been something.
Yeah.
Out
in Battle Creek, Michigan, I heard about this test you could take to get your high school diploma.
Yeah.
And the guy I spoke to about it, he said, "We're not advertising this. We're really not." they gave me a chart stating the percentage of high school graduates who got a lower score than I did.
Huh.
If I'd been down south, I could have been a college professor. But they didn't give me my diploma.
Wow.
English, they said. They gave me a year credit for being in service.
Just a year.
But they wouldn't give me today they would have given it
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
But they didn't then.
Huh.
I still have that at home. My son will get it. He's got all of
Yeah.
that stuff.
Tell us about your ring on your hand there. Your left hand there. That's
I
kinda
was at
neat.
the POW office in Togus, and this guy was wearing one of these rings.
Yeah.
I said, "You had neck grooming made it up in a ring, didn't you?" "Yeah," he said. "Well, it's a 2-inch ring."
Yeah.
They had to add silver to it.
A little bit for the band there. Yep. I'm just gonna zoom in on it here. That's neat. And can you show us your hat again and your jacket?
What did I do with it?
The Gray Eagles hat's there. Show us that. There we go.
My jacket's on the back of my chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell us about
you want
your.
me to put it on?
Sure, sure. I'll just pull this back here for a second. And then tell us one more time about your bag.
This is cowhide, by the way. A lot of them are made out of goat skin. They're a lot like it.
Yeah. So that's a relatively new one then.
Huh?
That's a relatively new one. But you had it made up there. There you go. The spirit of winsome.
Yeah. Can you get the win?
Yep.
The name?
Yep. And who was it that painted that?
Mary Case made the lettering, and Stephen Mudgett painted the plane.
Very nice.
He is real good.
Very nice.
He signed it.
Yep. And can you tell us about your bag there? Your bag that you...
Oh, yeah, this is a parachute bag. We called it parachute bag. We carried gear to the plane, parachute, flight clothing. Although, once we started flying missions, a parachute and heated suits, goggles, and everything were in a bin in the chute room. But if you were making other trips, you used this. And this is vintage. I can't give you the exact date on it, but it's World War II.
Well, very nice. Well, we appreciate you talking with us today. And I'm going to...
Did I do a good enough job?
You did. You did a fabulous job. Lots of great stories, and we'll go, if we can, we'd like to borrow the pictures here that we have, and we'll scan those, do nice high-quality scans of those. And, sir, we thank you very much for your participation today, and
Thank you for doing that, Bob.
you passed the audition.
And her first name?
I'm Kirsty.
Casey?
Kirsty?
Kirsty.
Kirsty.
Kirsty Simpson.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you, Kirsty.
It's nice meeting you too. You're a great story.
Okay, go ahead.
When Jack and I were over to London and we were talking to the people about the plane, a lady asked me if I ever saw a plane blow up.
Oh, wow.
And I said, yes, 3 separate occasions I saw a plane blow up for no apparent reason. There was no flak, no fighters. There's a group flying along, and suddenly there's a ball of fire, and the plane disappears. And I said, we don't know what happened. But I had a theory. One plane in every group was loaded with 24-hour delayed action fuses on the bombs. You didn't touch these because they were booby trapped.
Yeah.
You could not disarm the bombs. And I always figured the timing device, those planes were loaded with those and the timing device was fouled up. We were loaded with them one day and we had, the mission was scrubbed. And we had to take those bombs out and drop them in the channel. And I remember we got out there, we had to be a certain distance. And the pilot called Moody, are we far enough out? Moody said yes. He called the bombardier and said, Miller, get rid of the damn things. Everybody was scared of them.
Mm-hmm.
We were taxiing out to take off. While we were taxiing, we blew a tire. We had to replace that tire and wheel. And while we were waiting, that timer was ticking away.
Mm. Wow.
And I always figured that is what happened to those
planes that you
that
saw.
I saw blow up
Here's the rest of your,
in 14 missions. You copied those too?
Yep, I've copied them all. So,
Aren't you a sweetheart?
yeah, it's pretty easy.
alright. Thank you so much for bringing them in.
Been a pleasure, Bob.
Thank you very much, sir. It's been a real pleasure for us, too.
You made it real easy for me.
We try.
I have to tell you, public speaking was something that I had a real phobia about.
Mm.
You cannot believe the deathly fear I had of it. And for 12 years now, I've helped on the tour of Collins Plains on the 17. And I remember down in Manchester, I had about 20 people lined up by the right wing. The turret was here behind me. Caught a movement out of the corner of my eye and looked around. There's another 20 high school kids with 4 teachers.
Wow.
One of them wanted to come down the southern part of the state and lecture, but I didn't feel like driving that distance for that. But it wasn't until the past year that I've become comfortable enough to do this. I'm 88 years old.
Well, you did a great job. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Huh?
You speak very eloquently.